And we are live. So happy Memorial Day to our Facebook community, to all of you. Alejandro Tornato coming directly from Beaufort, sunny Beaufort, Georgia. And as you can see on that moving a ticker at the bottom, it's a happy Memorial Day today. And it's another session and another episode of Alejandro and Bob Unplugged. And I have there my dear friend and colleague, Bob DiGiacomo. And I would like to introduce him to all of you. So, happy Memorial Day to you, Mr. Bob. How are you doing?
And a wonderful Memorial Day to you, but more importantly, and most importantly, a happy Memorial Day to all those that we remember who paid the ultimate price.
That's exactly right.
As we know that it's great to be out there barbecuing hot dogs and hamburgers and being out swimming and whatever else one does to do that, but it's so important to teach the generations that follow us the history of the history. In fact, that's why I've been remembering a whole lot of things today.
Um, when you're saying you're being with that emphasis that you've been remembering, I know. I mean, when I think of you, I think of someone who is very much of an intentional person. You don't have intentions, but you live your life intentionally. So when you said that you remembered things, is that you force yourself to remember things that you wanted to remember, or those thoughts of the past, I mean, just because of today's Memorial Day, they just came flooding into your conscious?
Well, that would be partially true because the actual fact, it's always amazing when the synapses fire because you could be doing something else and suddenly you remember back to when you were small. You remember back a week ago. You remember back 5 years ago that something occurred. As an example, some of my former classmates
Mm-hmm.
have been busy publishing on Facebook some of the elementary school pictures going back way back. And then another one of my former classmates from my hometown actually put up a posting about a link that would take us to a virtual parade in
Okay.
the hometown.
Oh.
And so I started my synapses started firing and I started reminiscing about how I used to march in so many Memorial Day parades back when I was in the Scouts. I remember uh, I remember back to things that happened. As in fact, right now my synapses are firing, and I'm thinking of things that took place in my elementary school days uh, that were good and maybe not so good. Um, and one thing that just fired off in my mind was how I used to, because you could back in those days, walk to school at a very young age, and nobody had to worry whether you were going to get kidnapped or run over. You just did it, and every day I walked back and forth to school. And I don't know about you where you were growing up, but when it snowed, I used to have to walk to school. It was uphill both ways, uphill.
Um, I remember, of course, I mean, I did not grow up during my um, uh, during my formative years, I mean, going back, I mean, to primary education, primary school, I didn't grow up here in the States. I grew up in Buenos Aires, in Argentina. And I remember back then, the school was, I would say, about 10, 15 minutes from my house. And I don't remember ever in primary school for, I guess, 7 or 8 years, whatever, I mean, it was. I never, I never drove to school. I mean, just because at that time we didn't have a vehicle, we didn't have a car. My family didn't have a car. So, and I never took any bus. So I remember always for years, just walking back and forth to school. And it was a great, I mean, and we never gave it a second thought of that anything would ever happen. And so, and I began when I went into secondary education. Then I went back and forth, I mean, on a bus, not a school bus, just a regular, I mean, a regular transit bus.
Regular bus.
Yes. And it was always fun, and it was great. I mean, and it was just either busing or walking, and that was life. So when I hear, you know, there's a mixed feeling sometimes, because when I hear people talking about, and I'm sure that you heard, and I can see there on your tagline there, I remember those days, Bob. But when I hear people talking specifically about the good old days, now sometimes, I mean, the question comes to mind, were those good old days, were all that good? I mean, why were they good? Compared to what? When we're saying that those were the good old days, does that mean in the minds of the people who utter those words, is it that they are not satisfied with today's days? That today's days are not as good as those good old days? I mean, I think that we need to be living in the moment. Those were the good old days, and we enjoyed those days. But those days are gone. They're just a remembrance.
Did we really enjoy those days?
Well, when I look back on it, and when I begin to remember the things that I did in those days, and the friends that I had, and the things that I did in school, and I truly, I love those days. Now, would I want those days to come back and to relive those days? Well, perhaps not, because those were just a phase in my own life journey, and now is a different one. And so I have to enjoy today as much as I did back then. What about you, Bob?
So clearly you don't know how many songs have been popping in my head. Those were the days, my friend, we thought they'd never end. We'd sing and dance forever in a day. We'd live a life we choose. We'd fight and never lose. Those were the days. Oh, yes, those were the days. And the whole point is that good, bad, or indifferent, as Dickens said, it was the best of times. It was the worst of times, but it was the times. And life was so much simpler then, because as a child growing up, our responsibilities were a lot lighter. But I want to touch on a point as I was reminiscing, because we used to have a phone in the house. Now, again, when I first came here to this island, the phone in the house was connected to a party line, which was revelation.
It wasn't this phone, was it?
No, it wasn't that phone. It was something that was on the wall, or it was on the table, and it was kind of shaped like this, and it had a thing you picked up with a cord attached.
And it weighed. Don't forget to mention the fact that you had to be very athletic to use that phone, because it weighed almost half a ton.
Oh yes.
Did it not?
Well, except if it was up on the wall, and then whether or not your parents mounted it up high so you couldn't get to it right away, but you figured out ways to get to the phone. But it had this thing that you put your finger in. There were holes. It was called the dial. And in each of these holes, there were numbers. And then it started at A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, etc. And the reason they had letters in there with the numbers is because there used to be things called exchanges. And so my personal exchange in my house was what was called Wells. There was another one up the street called Walnut. And each area that you went into had a different exchange, but you didn't dial WALNUT or WELLS. You took the first two letters. So Wells was WE. So when they asked you what your phone number was, it was, well, Wells 13080. I memorized. I was very good at memorizing numbers. And then eventually the exchange letters disappeared and you just used numbers. And then things modernized a bit, and the dial just showed that you had a little extra money. The dial was replaced by, and the touch tone phone appeared, because see, when you were dialing that, it was triggering little things in the exchange. That's that right. It was almost like you had an operator switchboard and she was busy plugging wires into the different, I don't know how many people know what a switchboard is.
Well, I tell you one thing. It was, now that you're talking about that, I mean, I remember, going to my father used to work in Buenos Aires, in downtown, and he worked for many years. I think that was the only job that he ever had. And he was there, from the time that he was like a teenager until the time that he retired. At maybe,
there's going to be some noise here in a second, but keep going.
Yes, 60, like 60 plus. And he worked for this company, an insurance company. And I remember in the very old days that the person who was in charge, the person, on the switchboard, it was fascinating, because it was like, it looked like an airplane cockpit panel, with a lot of things to plug in and unplugged, and lights and blinking lights and everything. And I always got so fascinated. But that's how they would route calls, to the different offices, and they knew where to plug or where to unplug, and so forth. And then we went from that to today, where we don't have all that, but something remained, and is the unplugged revolution with the two of us. That remained, and that is here, and that will stay.
And that's so important to go into things like that, because it eventually led to this thing. And when you say to some of the younger generation, well, dial up on the phone, it's like, huh? What? What are you talking? Phone? What's that? No.
Yes, they just don't have. Um, they don't have the concept. And I remember. I tell you one thing, Bob. I mean, I remember something. It really struck me because this was prior to coronavirus, and when we could go, I mean, to Starbucks and then sit down on a table, then work in Starbucks, and then engage people in conversation. And so one day there was this, I think that it must have been like a teenager, I mean, sitting either next to me or across on the table from me. And I saw that he was studying, and he was studying math. And then I asked him and says, "Hey, listen, just a quick question. Do you use log tables in school right now?" And so he gave me a look, and I also said, "And do you know what a slide rule is?" And he just looked at me as if I was a creature from Venus or Mars or somewhere out in the galaxies, in the very far away galaxies, because he just could not. It didn't resonate with that. Log tables, a logarithmic table, I mean, that you can add and subtract and take the anti-log of the number, and a slide rule where you could do operations, but he just, I mean, he didn't know what I was talking about. And so I had to explain to him, but those things were absolutely foreign to him.
Well, you've given me a sign, maybe perhaps even a cosign, but we're not going to go off on a tangent, okay?
That's exactly right.
But you know, again, as you're speaking, you're reminding me of things that I remember from back in those days. One of them was that I grew up in the 50s and the 60s. That was the era of the sci-fi movies, the black and white sci-fi movies. Usually they
the Japanese. Isn't it? Hey, Bob. Hello, Bob. I mean, Bob, I think that the connection just, I don't know what happened. But I guess here in Beaufort, we are still alive. And let's see. I mean, if Bob can rejoin the stream. You see, we have to be prepared for these kinds of things when we're dealing with technology, when we are and these are things that go beyond our control. I mean, there's nothing that we can do, especially well. I mean, you know that Bob right now, I mean, he's coming live, I mean, from Bermuda. So the connections, and you don't know, I mean, where those connections are being impacted. But that's what happens. I mean, when we are dealing with the internet and different streaming platforms, and just let's wait a little bit until to see, I mean, if Bob can rejoin the live stream. And but in the meantime, how are you celebrating your Memorial Day? This year is not like any other year. I mean, perhaps in years past, You celebrated Memorial Day by going and having a great barbecue with friends outside, and everybody was enjoying themselves. I mean, is that the same this year, or is it different? I mean, you can go and barbecue outside, and perhaps keeping with the social distancing guidelines. You don't have to be all together. I mean, you can just go and maintain that social distance and still enjoy one another's companies and have a great time and eat and drink and be merry. And but how are you? How are you really celebrating this Memorial Day? How, when it comes about, and I think that Bob mentioned that let me before I continue, let me see if Bob is now is not in there. Let me come back here and see. Now Bob is not there, so I don't know. Let me check my phone to see if something happened. Let me see. I mean, if I can call him or. Well, I don't know what happened to him. I mean, whether his computer went dead or it was the connection. I really don't know. But let me let me just do this. Let me end this broadcast, and I truly apologize because we never had this severe kind of technical glitch. But it doesn't mean that we will never have such a glitch. I mean, today is a vivid example of that. But in any case, it's been great to connect with you for the time that we had a good connection with Bob. And what I want to do is I want to wish you all a great rest of this Memorial Day. Enjoy it. Have a great time. Have fun. But at the same time, be mindful and take some time to really reflect upon the fact that we are living in a country, in a free country, as a result of the work, the patriotism, and the really, the dedication of patriots in the past, who really fought and paid the ultimate price to give this land complete and total freedom. And that is a good thing to be thinking about. So as you're going about your day, just spend a few moments contemplating that fact, and it's going to be an enriching thought to see that we can enjoy freedom now, because in the past people gave themselves and gave their lives to achieve that freedom. So thank you so very much. Have a great Memorial Day. And up until the next time, it's being another episode of Alejandro and Bob Unplugged. And as I always end by reminding you to live every moment, to be resilient, and also to be passionate, to be kind, be intentional, and be well. Bye-bye.